If I would ask you right now, what kind of parent do you want to be? What's the first thing that pops in your head? See, there's a version of you that you imagined as a parent, and then there's reality. And in this episode, I'm going to help you fill that gap so you can actually show up as the parent that you've always wanted to be. And this is what we're going to cover today. For those who don't know me, my name is Danielle C Baker. I am the founder and CVO of Being Connected. I'm also a registered early childhood educator with over 20 years experience in the field. I do help parents and teachers navigate the realities of what parenting is today, but don't get it twisted. When you work with me, we're going to put the children's needs first. So we're going to have to put the ego and pride aside, and let's get to it. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C Baker. And before we get started, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And of course, this is season 4. So I do invite you to have a look at the previous 3 seasons. There may be some topics there that resonate with your reality today. They are timeless, so you can go and have a look there. We're going to jump right in with this very important topic, and it's actually at the root of all the work that I do in this industry. And it just relates to our values. Everything starts from there. Our values are our compass. And so it helps us navigate the world in the way that we want to show up. They are who we are. Nobody can negotiate your values with you. They represent you. So it's important to align our lives with our values. And that's something that we don't actually do. We're not taught what to do with our values. Many of us don't even know what our values are. So I like to refer to the fact that in business, there are organizational values that business organizations abide by, I guess I could say. And there's strategic planning every 3, 5 or so years where they review everything to make sure that the values are aligned with the organization's mission and vision and course correct if we need to. And that's exactly what that is. Values are your compass. And so it's important as an individual, but also as a parent to be solid on our values so that they can show up in our parenting. So I am going to ask you, was there ever a moment where you've reacted and then you were kind of disappointed with the way that you show up? Maybe you kind of lost your cool, you raised your voice, or you just completely shut down, or even worse, you repeated the same generic phrase that your parents used to use on you. So these are usually signs of the fact that when we get through moments of stress, which is very normal in parenting, our instincts kick in, our values take a back seat, and our instincts kick in. So we do forget to take that breath and say, okay, is this aligned with my values right now? Or maybe something triggered you because your values were being disrespected. And so that kind of created a whole meltdown. So this is what we're going to cover today. How are your values showing up as a parent? Are they actually showing up? We have to realize that parenting isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. If we want to show up better for our children, if we want to uh, cut out generational patterns, if we want to break the cycles, we need to be sure that we are solid, that our wounded selves are not showing up in our parenting so that our children are a bit more free to it. And I'm going to help you through that. It is actually part, like I said, it's the root of my work in my book, Bringing Up the World. This is actually the first chapter. And when I work with families or school districts or organizations, I always start with values. We need to be sure that we understand what our values are, what they mean to us, and how they are actually showing up in our lives so that we can make better decisions and we can handle situations in a better way. So this is very important to start when it comes to parenting, but whatever I cover today, it's going to transfer over to any of your relationships, not just with your children, but with your partners, with your family, with work coworkers. with members of your community. So it does transfer everything over. So I'm going to walk you through step by step how you can go from where you are showing up as a parent, how reactive you are to where you actually want to be, or where you wished you would have been before you became a parent. That's a whole other reality. So I ask at the beginning of this episode, what kind of parent do you want to be? So think about this. What is the first thing that comes to mind? You could be, I'm a present parent. I am patient. I am safe. I'm a safe parent. There's so many different things that you could be. And once you have a better picture of how you want it to be, you want to be fun, you want to be understanding, all of that. But I am going to ask you, did you ever write them down? I've had the privilege, I am going to say privilege, of working with parents who have actually mapped out a parenting plan for them, how they wanted to show up, how their values are, how they can course correct when they go adrift a little. And that was absolutely beautiful because we don't get to see that a lot. We're just going to thrown into our parent role, just like every other generation, but to actually have a plan makes a difference. And this is why it's so important to write it down. You can keep it for yourself. You don't need to preach it to everybody around you, but writing it down is so important. Like I mentioned, businesses and organizations actually write their mission statements, their vision, they write their organization values and what that means, the definition for it. And then they base their decisions um, from that. So any decision that needs to be made, any conflict that needs to be resolved will be done according to the organizational values. So when you're working with a team, it brings everybody back to the path we were taking together. So this is why it works great with families. Whether you're a single parent or not, you do have quite a few people around you that influence you and your children. So it's important to write it down so you can always go back to them in those moments in your life where you're just too overwhelmed, overstimulated, and going through some rough patches. Having them written down is very important. Now, I take it a step further. It's one thing to write down what your parental values are or your family values are, but write down the definition. Everything means something different to them. So you may be with a partner that share your values, but it may mean something different to them. And this is why sometimes we still have conflicts, even if we are with somebody who share our values. It can mean something very different. So it is important to write them down. Whatever came up in your head when I asked you that question, write them down. Another thing that being clear on our values does is once you're clear on them, it will help you to cut out the noise around you. There is so much pressure for parents to have this picture perfect family. We do have a lot of external influences that give us utopian version of what a perfect parent is, even though that doesn't exist. Social media has a huge influence on how we show up for our children. And most of the time, it actually prevents us to actually show up for our children because we're so consumed by how we're supposed to be that we kind of forget the important part, and that's our children. So yes, values are a compass. That's what I've been saying since the beginning of this episode, but I take it a step further to say it's your rudder. It's one thing to have a compass to tell you where to go, but you need a rudder to get you there when you kind of get eh, thrown for a detour. So it is important to know what your values are and to use them. It's going to help you a lot when you're following trends to take a step back and say, wait a minute, does that even work for me? Is this how I want to show up? What does that look like for my family and our reality? Because especially for social media, people will always post their highlight reels. They're not going to post their failures. So we are comparing our everyday struggles to somebody's picture perfect moment that they created behind the scenes. And so we're not seeing what's happening in the other rooms when they are recording their content. So just be sure that for your values, you're going to know how you show up when your child is ill. You're going to know when to show up when there's some pressures from the schools, from the grandparents, from the community, from the coaches, uh, everybody that has, they think they have a say in how you raise your children. It's important for you to know how you're going to show up for that. Once you're solid in your values, you're going to be able to make those decisions and cut out that background noise to the point where you're just going to be like, it's not even going to affect you anymore. It's very, very powerful. Before I go into filling the gap between the parent you wanted to be and the parent you actually are, it is important to understand why we misalign in the first place. Why is there a gap in the first place? And this will come back down to the fact that there is not one parent out there that intentionally wants to be misaligned with their values. That's just not a thing. I always say I've never, in every situation that I've worked with, in every family portrait that I've worked with, I've never met a parent who wakes up in the morning and says, how can I make my child's life miserable today? Or how can I traumatize my child? That's just not our intention at all. It may be what happens at times, but it's never our intention to be completely misaligned with our family values. And that's important to realize so that we're not so hard on ourselves. And it does help to take the shame and the guilt away because when we come back to ourselves after a moment of stress, we're going to start ruminating over how we handled the situation and not be too proud of how we handled it. And then guilt and shame kicks in, and that just adds to more stress and more reactive behaviors on our part. So, like I said, it's never intentional when we get to misaligned with our values. It does happen because we are overwhelmed, we are stressed, we have decision fatigue, we have mental overload, right? We all know that. And most importantly, we are also fighting against generational patterns that are subconscious to us. So we're not even aware that we are just keeping up with the traditions, unfortunately. So there is a lot there that we're fighting against when we were trying to show up as the parent that we really want to be, or when we're trying to break generational cycles. Very important to understand that. So we need to give ourselves grace. We do need to not judge ourselves so harshly because there's a lot going on. And when we are in that survival mode, our instincts kick in and our values just step aside. So that's why we get misaligned. And this brings me right back to the theme I've kind of been following this season on self-awareness. Self-awareness is so important in this because that's what's going to help us move away from this misalignment. The more we practice focusing on our values, the more it will become an instinct and they will start showing up. They're not going to step aside. They're going to become our how we react. But we do need to practice because, again, we were never taught that. We were never told, we know about values, but we were never really told how to find them. What are our real values? Not the inherited values that we got from family and our community, but our true values, what makes us who we are. And so it's important the more you practice, the more you review, if you have them written down. And whenever you start feeling a little off, you go back to them and reread it. It's going to become an instinct for you to live by your values. And so they will come at the front when there is time, when you're facing times where you need to react or respond. There's a difference there. The other thing about awareness, too, is it helps us see the gap between who we want to be and who we truly are. So that self-awareness is so important. And that's what we need to work on first before we can start working on how we show up and how we respond or how we react when our children trigger us. By narrowing that gap, this is where we're going to remove the shame and the guilt that comes with every time we show up differently from what we actually want to do. So I can give you an example because I could tell you, oh, you just need to fill the gap, but what does that look like? So I'm going to give you some concrete example. If we're going with curiosity, this is one of my values. I am a scientist at heart. That was my first love. So curiosity is something, and again, the definition is different, right? For some people, curiosity kills the cat. It's something that gets you in trouble. But for me, curiosity is more of uh, what if, it's to step away from the routine, the same patterns. What if we did something different? What would that look like if we did this? What is the reason behind our behaviors? So in terms of curiosity is I want to respond with curiosity. So your child's behavior when you're nurturing your curiosity value would be like, okay, what's the reason behind the behavior? Why did my child react this way? Why does my child behave this way? It takes a lot of the pressure off and the blaming of the child's behavior. The child is speaking to us. It's a form of communication. Their behavior is a form of communication. So when curiosity, as an example, is your value, and you're thinking, okay, so I'll just respond with curiosity by asking questions. But the reality is, you're going to immediately correct. If your child does something wrong, you are going to step into your authoritative parent mode and start correcting the behavior without actually asking why, what caused this behavior in the first place. So that is one of the examples I like to use. If your value is, I want connection with my child, the reality can often be that you're expecting compliance. Then you're going to need to see how can I fill that gap to be able to come back to connection instead of demanding to just do it because I said so. So again, I just want to make a really good, important point here that this gap of how we want to show up and the reality of how we show up is not a failure. It's actually an invitation for us to course correct. When I was saying it's the compass or the rudder, is to notice that you've gone off course. You're reacting in a way that you didn't want to, and to course correct that to bring you back on track. It really is something that we need to be aware of when we are in a parenting mode. Now, in my book, I also cover in one of the chapters these mini wins. We do get hard on ourselves. We're very harsh when we do go off track. So, those mini wins are very important. Those moments where you were able to take maybe even a half a second before you reacted or before you showed up the way you didn't want to. Those many little moments are what's important. They're going to make you realize that you are showing up as a good parent most of the time and that you are able to change some of those behaviors that are very hard to move away from. So now that I've given you the main points of, what happens and why we're misaligned as parents, we're going to go into closing that gap. I always like to leave you with something that you could start right away. Now, I do have to say, and those who know me very well know that I do not like anagrams. I do not like them. I find them cheesy, but unfortunately, I'm using one in this one, and it's only because it really works. And I accidentally stumbled on that, and I had to just take a few breaths and say, all right, I'm going to use it because it actually works. I've seen it in action. It really works. So to close that gap, we're going to use the anagram align. And I'm going to break it down for you. We're going to start with A, which is to acknowledge with the simple question of what happened. You're not giving excuses. You're not, no, there's no room for shame there. It's just what happened. Describe what happened. I yelled, right? I was emotionally unavailable. Just straightforward, short sentence. What really happened? Take the emotions out of it. What happened? That's your first step, is to acknowledge really what happened. The next step is to look within. That's your L. Look within. What happened inside me? What is it that triggered me? How did that come up in my body just before I reacted? Did I feel heat? Did I get clenched, tense up? Did I completely disconnect? Figure out what is it that happened that so try not to use excuses, but were you tired? Did you just need a sandwich, maybe? Try to figure out what happened, what triggered you, what made you tip over. The I in the line is to identify the value. Which value did I want to live here that I didn't get to? But I like to take it a step further as well. In some situation is which value was disrespected or did I feel was disrespected, which triggered me? Because this is usually what happens when we are reactive, is because something went against our values. And that can happen with our children, not because they're disrespecting our values, but because they're putting a mirror in front of us to show us exactly where our values are not aligned in our lives. This is why they trigger the out of us, right? So it's not them disrespecting our values, it's them showing us where we are disrespecting our own values. So identify the values that was at play there. What is it? Like I said earlier, if it was a connection issue, you want to be there and connect with your child. You want to be present there for your child, but you were distracted. You didn't pay attention. You didn't give them a second to explain, or you were on your phone the entire time. This is the value that was disrespected. That's the value that's at play here is you were not present. So you can start with that. It's important to identify which value, because again, that's your rudder. You need to know where to course correct. The G is for grow. So what is the one tiny little thing that I can do differently for the next time this happens? This is very important. Again, I mentioned earlier the mini wins. You don't want to go with a huge plan with five different things. You don't want to go with 10, but just one. What is that one small little thing that I can do differently so this that it'll change how I show up when reality kicks in? The N is for nurturing repair. So the first thing you need to do is repair with yourself. You cannot repair a relationship if you haven't made peace with yourself first. So you need to repair with yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Do the work that you need to do to make sure that you can trust yourself when when you're giving it a little stress. And then you can repair with your child or with the relationship that was at play there. So that is one of the most important steps as well, because this is where trust will grow. Repairing the relationship is the step that most people will skip. And so, yes, awareness is important. You need to understand where the gap is, but you also need to do something about it. So, you identify the value, you've identified what happened, you've identified what happened inside of you. But if you just leave it there, you're not actually fixing anything. You're not changing anything. And this is some of the challenges that we have right now is we are uh, getting better at self-awareness. But if you don't do anything about it and just expecting people to say, hey, this is what happens to me. This is how I am. But I'm not going to do anything to change that. I just expect you to work around it, tiptoe around that. And that's not self-awareness. That's not going to help anybody. So that would be an entirely different episode. But the repair part is so important. You can't skip that. Once you understood everything that happened and what triggered you, you need to go back, course correct, and say, hey, this wasn't cool. I'm so sorry. And I am aware that I didn't handle this properly, but this is what I'm going to do now to change that so it doesn't happen again. Now you have to understand with your children too, your words really don't mean anything. They're going to watch what you do. So you can say, I'm going to change this. I'm not going to do that again. But if you don't actually do it, they're not going to believe you. So this is why I say trust grows here in the repair phase. If you've hurt your child or your partner or whoever, if your actions are not showing that you're making progress, that you're changing things, they're not going to trust you. So it's very important. You can't miss or skip this step. So I'm finally going to leave you with how you can live with your values on a daily basis. Now, I do have a course on a YouTube course that is free, and it goes basically in line with the first chapter in my book in finding what your true values are, not your inherited ones, and to identify them, to give them a definition, and to define how that shows up in your life and how you can correct that so that you are aligned with your values in every aspect of your life. But for this one, I'm going to leave you with a little experiment for this week. So I want you to choose one value, not five, not 10, but just one value. And every evening, ask yourself, how did that value show up today? Well, let's use connection as an example. And you would ask yourself every night, Did my child experience connection with me today? Now, we're not looking for a huge thing. It's any little moment. This is when I talk about micro wins, but every little moment, one tiny little moment where there was a moment of connection with your child, it is important to notice them so that they can show up even more in your daily life. So this week, that's all you do. Choose one. And, in my case, if it's curiosity, it's just like, when did I actually ask one question instead of react right away, instead of correcting right away? Uh, can I ask the one question before I jump to conclusions? This would be another example of what to, so I do invite you to give it a try this week, and you can add in the comments or reach out to let me know how that's going for you. But it's just to take it a little step forward, and actually doing something about it right away will help you grow exponentially. These changes, these tiny little micro changes, change so much, and it grows. It really does grow exponentially. Things get better so much faster if you just implement a tiny little thing every day. It's very important to remember that our children don't need perfection from us. They just need consistency. So if we can do this a little bit every day, uh, it does make a world of difference for them. So I'm going to leave you with that today. I just want you to remember that your values are not to be used to judge who you are as a parent. They really are there to guide you and to help you get back on track when you drift away a little bit. Every parent drifts. Let's make that clear. We all know it, but we don't all see it every day. We're seeing a utopian view of what parenting is, but every parent drifts. Every parent has moments where they wish they could take back. So don't be too hard on yourself when you do slip. It happens. We're humans. That's what makes us human. So just keep doing the work that you need to do to show up as the parent that you always wanted to be, and maybe the parent that you needed as well. So if you want to know more about realigning with your values, I do invite you to get the book, Bringing Up the World. Like I said, we start with the parent first. We need to work on you before you can work on your children. And so you can get that on Amazon. I will put the link below. And I do invite you, if you do want to do a little bit more work, it does take time. There is the course on YouTube channel, and you will get, I believe it's 6 modules with some work that you need to do, and supporting resources as well. But I work with 9 environments in your life, working with financial relationships, your digital world. How do your values show up there? So I work in 9 different environments. So if you're interested, you could go check that out as well. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And until next time, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.